No, there is no mystery. He get in and he never came out.
August 18th, 2010, just before sunset. At Vortex Spring, a man in full scuba gear walks past the part of the water everyone else uses and heads straight for a restricted area he isn't supposed to enter. He doesn't slow down, doesn't hesitate, and doesn't look like someone who's about to break a rule. He looks like someone who already decided the rule doesn't apply. Beneath the surface, 58 feet down, there's a metal gate. It's locked for a reason. Beyond it is a cave system so tight, so dark, and so unforgiving that even trained cave divers approach it carefully. He goes straight to it. Two divers in the water notice what he's doing. One of them pauses, then makes a decision that still doesn't make sense years later. He turns back, swims down, unlocks the gate from the inside, and lets him through. The man disappears into the opening without a word, and that man had a name, Ben McDaniel. He never comes back up. His truck sits in the parking lot for 2 days before anyone realizes he's missing. By the time the search begins, it's already too late for simple answers. Elite cave divers push deep into the system, following the only path he could have taken. They find his tanks, placed with precision. And then, nothing. No body, no gear, no trace. Only one detail refuses to go away. That gate wasn't supposed to open, and once it did, whatever was waiting on the other side was already set in motion. The water at Vortex Spring looked almost too perfect that summer. Crystal clear, calm, like glass stretched over a secret no one was meant to keep. From the surface, everything made sense. Light reached the bottom. Distances were visible. Movements were predictable. It felt controlled. That's the version most people stayed in. It wasn't the version Ben McDaniel came for. At 30, he was the oldest son of Shelby and Patty McDaniel, raised in stability, expectation, and a life that, from the outside, looked intact. Tall, athletic, quietly confident. The kind of man people assume has direction, but the years leading up to that summer had quietly stripped that away. A marriage that ended, a business that collapsed under pressure, and a loss that didn't resolve. The sudden death of his younger brother, Paul. Ben was the one who found him. After that, things above ground stopped feeling steady, so he left. Not dramatically, not all at once, just gradually. He moved down to the Gulf Coast, staying at his parents' place near Santa Rosa Beach. Mornings were quiet. Coffee on the porch, long stretches of looking out at a horizon that didn't ask anything from him. And in the afternoons, he drove to the spring, again and again. It became routine, not social, not loud, just consistent. Gear in the back of his truck, the same path, the same entry point, the same descent into water that didn't argue, didn't change, didn't take anything personally. He wasn't reckless, not exactly. He was open water certified. He had been diving since he was 15. He understood the basics, the limits, the rules that kept people safe. But something in him had shifted. The shallow water, the part everyone else stayed in, started to feel incomplete, too open, too exposed. Too close to everything he was trying not to think about. The deeper water felt different, quieter, tighter, more focused. A place where attention had to narrow, where the outside world couldn't follow, where nothing existed except the next breath and the next movement. And over time, that difference stopped feeling like a boundary. It started to feel like direction. Because for Ben, the water wasn't just somewhere to go. It was somewhere that made sense. And the deeper it got, the more that feeling held. In the days leading up to August 18th, Ben McDaniel was already spending more time at Vortex Spring than usual. Not enough to raise alarms, but enough to form a pattern. He began arriving later in the day when the light was fading and most divers were already leaving. He stayed longer too, long enough that staff started to notice. Not because he was breaking rules, but because he was getting closer to where the rules actually mattered. Over multiple dives, he kept returning to the same area. The deeper section, the boundary, not directly, not aggressively, but repeatedly. That's how escalation usually looks, not a single decision, a series of smaller ones. That all point in the same direction. About a week before that Wednesday, Ben had briefly returned to Tennessee to see his family. Then he came back to Florida, back to the same routine, back to the same water. Wednesday, August 18th, 2010. Earlier that day, Ben arrived at the spring and completed a routine dive in the open basin. Nothing unusual, no signs of distress, no indication that anything was about to go wrong, but instead of leaving, he stayed, floating near the deeper section, spending time above the same stretch of water, looking down more than diving as if he was trying to understand something that wasn't visible from the surface. That detail matters, because experienced divers don't just linger near dangerous zones. They either avoid them, or they're preparing for something. Later that evening, as the sun began to drop, Ben geared up again. This time he was alone. No dive buddy, no shared plan. Just his equipment, and whatever he had already decided. Around 7:30 p.m., he entered the water. Calm. Controlled. Like every dive before it. At roughly 58 feet below the surface, there was a gated entrance leading into a restricted cave system, an area not meant for divers without proper cave certification. 2 dive shop employees were in the water at the time, heading back toward the surface. They saw Ben descending, heading in that direction. One of them recognized him. He knew Ben had been spending time near that area. He knew he wasn't certified for cave diving. Ben kept moving, not hesitating, not turning back. That was the last confirmed moment anyone saw him alive. No one saw him resurface. No one saw what happened after that point. The next day, August 19th, his truck remained in the parking lot. No one thought much of it. Ben was a regular. It wasn't unusual for him to be around. Then another day passed. Still there. Unmoved. By the morning of August 20th, the pattern broke. 2 days. Same position. Same vehicle. No sign of the man who drove it there. That's when someone finally made the call. And what had looked like routine suddenly wasn't anymore, because by the time anyone realized something was wrong, Ben McDaniel had already been missing for nearly 48 hours, and whatever happened after he went under had happened without a single witness. The call came in on August 20th. By then, Ben McDaniel had been gone for nearly 2 days. At first, it didn't look unusual. A truck left in the parking lot at Vortex Spring. A diver known to come and go, no sign of violence. To the Holmes County Sheriff's Office, it read like a routine call. Missing diver. Likely accident. Simple. Until they got there. The surface told them nothing. The water was calm. Clear. Sunlight cutting straight down into blue-green stillness. No disturbance. No urgency. Just a quiet spring hiding something 58 feet below. Ben's truck was still there. Parked. Undisturbed. His wallet inside. No signs of struggle. No evidence that anything had gone wrong, at least not above the surface. But the timeline didn't sit right. 2 days. No one noticed for 2 full days. That's where the case began to shift. The first working theory was straightforward. Ben entered the cave. Got disoriented. Ran out of air. A tragic but familiar ending in cave diving. It made sense, on paper. But the cave didn't cooperate. Over the next 5 weeks, some of the most experienced cave divers in the country were brought in. They went deep. Through narrow passages where visibility disappears with a single wrong movement. Through sections where silt hangs in the water like smoke, ready to blind anyone who disturbs it. This wasn't a casual search. It was controlled, methodical, dangerous. They found his stage tanks, placed with precision. Exactly where a diver would leave them to extend a long exit. That detail mattered, because it meant one thing. Ben hadn't panicked, at least not at that point. But that's all they found. No body, no mask, no fins, no sign of equipment failure, nothing that suggested a struggle, nothing that suggested a mistake. The deeper they searched, the less it made sense. Divers who knew that cave system better than anyone started saying the same thing, quietly at first, then out loud. He's not in there. And that's where the case stopped being simple. Because if Ben McDaniel died in that cave, there should have been something. A body, a piece of gear, a trace. Cave systems are dangerous, but they don't usually erase people. That's when attention turned to the last confirmed moment he was seen, and the man who was there when it happened. Eduardo Turan. He admitted it. He saw Ben descending. He knew he wasn't certified for cave diving, and he still swam back down, and opened the restricted gate. He said Ben went in alone. He said that was the last time he saw him. He took a polygraph, passed. His timeline held, on paper. But there were questions that didn't go away. Why open the gate for an unqualified diver? Why wait until the truck had been there for 2 days before raising concern? And how could he be so certain, early on, that Ben was dead behind that gate, before any search had even begun? No single answer broke his story, but nothing about it fully settled either. The McDaniel family refused to accept the simplest explanation. They pushed, offered rewards, brought in private investigators, re-examined every detail. They focused on the same problem the divers had already seen. If Ben was in that cave, he should have been found. Years passed. Searches were repeated. New teams, new attempts, different conditions. Each time the same result. Nothing. As of 2026, the case remains open. No confirmed cause of death. No body recovered. No physical evidence placing Ben beyond that final descent. No one charged. No conclusion. Only a sequence of events that stops exactly where it matters most. A man enters the water, moves toward a place he wasn't supposed to go, crosses a boundary, and then nothing. Because somewhere between the moment he passed that gate and the moment anyone realized he was gone, Ben McDaniel disappeared into a space that still hasn't given him back. And the more people try to explain it, the less certain it becomes that the cave is the only thing holding the answer. Years later, the water is still clear, the cave is still there, and the moment that matters still has no answer. What happened to Ben McDaniel after he passed through that gate? Every theory begins at the same point. A trained diver, alone. Entering a restricted cave system he wasn't certified to navigate, and then nothing. Theory 1. He died inside the cave. This is the explanation that comes first, and for a while, it made sense. Cave diving is unforgiving. One wrong turn, one cloud of disturbed silt, one moment of disorientation, and visibility drops to zero. No exit, no reference, no time. Ben enters the cave. He gets lost, runs out of air, and dies somewhere deep inside the system. Simple, logical, expected. But the cave doesn't support it. Search teams didn't just look. They went in, again and again. Some of the best cave divers in the country. Men who know how bodies behave underwater, how equipment drifts, how mistakes leave traces. They found his stage tanks, placed cleanly, deliberately, exactly where a diver would leave them to plan an exit. That detail changes everything. Because it suggests control, not panic. And beyond that point, nothing. No body, no gear, no sign that anything went wrong. Caves are dangerous, but they don't usually erase people. So the question shifts. If he died inside, why isn't he there? Theory 2. He made it out. This one is harder to accept, but it exists because of one fact. No physical evidence places Ben beyond that initial descent. If he didn't die inside the cave, then he had to come back out. That opens a different possibility. He exits the cave, reaches open water, and something happens after. An accident, a medical event, disorientation at the surface, even drowning outside the cave system. But again, there's a problem. Search teams covered the spring, the surrounding area, repeatedly, and found nothing. No body, no equipment, no trace of movement beyond the water. If he made it out, he disappeared somewhere even more visible, and that makes even less sense. Theory 3. The gate was the turning point. This is where the case becomes uncomfortable, because it introduces something that isn't environmental, it's human. Ben didn't open that gate himself. Someone opened it for him. That decision matters, because it changes the moment he crossed that boundary. It wasn't just risk, it was access. Granted, allowed. And the man who opened that gate was also the last person confirmed to see him before he disappeared. His story holds. No direct evidence contradicts it. No charge was ever filed. But certain details never settled. The timing, the delay in raising concern, the certainty in his early statements, individually. None of them prove anything. But together, they create friction. Not enough to solve the case, just enough to keep it open. Theory 4. Something went wrong that leaves no trace. This is the least satisfying answer, and sometimes the most realistic. An accident in the cave that search teams couldn't reach. A collapse, a hidden passage, a section too narrow or unstable to explore safely. Something that placed him somewhere beyond the searchable map. It doesn't require another person. It doesn't require intention, just a single moment, in the wrong place. But even this has limits, because the cave has been explored, multiple times, by people who know how to find what others miss, and still, nothing. The problem with every theory. Each explanation answers one part and breaks another. He died in the cave. Then where is he? He made it out. Then why no trace? Someone was involved. Then where is the evidence? An unknown accident. Then why hasn't anything been found? Every path leads somewhere, and then stops. What makes this case different isn't just that Ben McDaniel disappeared. It's that every logical explanation fails at the exact same point. The moment after he passed through that gate. Because up until then, everything is known, witnessed, documented. And after that, nothing is. Not a sound, not a trace, not a single piece of evidence that tells us what happened next. Only one certainty remains. A man entered a place he wasn't supposed to go, and whatever happened after that didn't leave anything behind. And that's the part no theory has ever been able to explain. There's something unsettling about this case, not just because Ben McDaniel disappeared, but because there's no clear point where everything obviously went wrong. No confirmed attack, no sudden struggle, no moment that breaks the sequence in a way we can easily recognize, which forces the question somewhere else. Not outward, but inward. Because nothing about Ben's behavior suggests panic. He wasn't reacting, he was choosing. And that difference matters. He had been diving at that spring repeatedly, getting closer to the same area, spending more time near a boundary most people avoided without thinking twice. And nothing bad happened. That's where the shift begins. Because the human brain doesn't treat risk as a fixed thing, it adjusts quietly. The more exposure you have to danger without consequences, the more that danger starts to feel manageable, predictable, even controlled. At first the boundary is clear, something to stay away from. Then it becomes something to observe, then something to approach, and eventually something to cross. Not in one decision, but in a series of smaller ones that never feel like mistakes while they're happening. Each step feels justified, each step feels earned, and by the time you reach the final one, it doesn't feel like a risk anymore. It feels like the next logical move. From the outside, entering that cave looks extreme. From the inside, after days of repetition and familiarity, it may not have felt extreme at all. That's what makes this case difficult to sit with. Because there's no clear line where you can say, that's where he lost control. The control was never lost, it was assumed, and that's often more dangerous than panic. Because panic can stop you. It can force hesitation. It can make you turn back. Confidence doesn't, especially when it's built on incomplete understanding. Cave diving doesn't allow for approximation. There's no direct exit, no quick correction, no margin for being slightly wrong. Once you move forward, the environment takes over, and it doesn't adjust to you. Ben didn't have formal cave certification, which means there were limits to what he could anticipate, not because he wasn't capable, but because certain environments don't reveal their risks until you're already inside them, and by then, those risks don't escalate gradually, they collapse. There's a moment in decisions like this that most people misunderstand. It's not when something goes wrong, it's when turning back is no longer the easier option. Because once that moment passes, everything that follows depends on conditions you don't fully control. This case doesn't give us the psychology of a killer, it gives us something else. A pattern that is much harder to see while it's happening. Familiarity turning into overconfidence, repetition removing caution, a controlled environment creating the illusion of safety, and a decision that feels completely rational, right up until the moment it isn't, because the most dangerous part of that night wasn't the cave, it was the belief that he understood it. And in environments like that, being almost right is the same as being completely wrong. Because in the end, this case doesn't just stay at Vortex Spring, it follows you. Not as a mystery to solve, but as a pattern to recognize. There's a moment in almost every dangerous situation where nothing feels wrong. No warning, no urgency, no clear signal to stop, just a quiet sense that everything is still under control. And that's exactly when people go too far. Because risk doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides inside familiarity, inside repetition, inside the belief that I've done this before, I know what I'm doing, until one step crosses a line that doesn't give second chances. If this story stays with you, let it stay for the right reason. Not fear, but awareness. Pay attention to the boundaries that exist for a reason, the ones that seem unnecessary until they aren't. Because the most dangerous mistake isn't making the wrong move, it's believing you're still safe. when you're already not. If you have any information about Ben McDaniel's disappearance, please contact the Holmes County Sheriff's Office. Even the smallest detail could matter. And if stories like this stay with you, the ones that don't give easy answers, consider following. Because some cases aren't about what we know. They're about how easily we convince ourselves we understand, right up until the moment we don't.